Tucker Carlson, over a few days ago, maybe over the weekend, was photographed with Viktor Orban, who is a right-wing authoritarian. Now, we've seen defenses of this purported journalism from the likes of Glenn Greenwald, because Tucker's there on a fact-finding mission. Actually, he's there to go to a fascist conference in which Orban will be attending. And Tucker decided to address the fact that he, I guess, met with Viktor Orban, or at the very least, he decided to carry water for Orban in a segment on his show, which he did from Hungary. Let's take a listen.
And the people who instituted those policies, Hungary and its government, have been ruthlessly attacked and unfairly attacked. It's authoritarian. They're fascists. That is, there are many lies being told right now. That may be the greatest of all. The last Hungarian revolution was less contested than our last revolution, and probably more transparent. That's true. It's not an endorsement of anybody, but that's true. So ignore the lawyers, the liars rather, and the lawyers, and judge for yourself. Is it working in Hungary or not? We think that it is.
Ignore the lawyers? What?
He misread the cue cards or something.
So where Tucker was he was delivering a speech at a place called MCC Fest, which is a conference sponsored by the Matthias Corvinus Collegium, which is a think tank.
Oh yes, Gorka knows all about the...
A think tank, which was granted $1.7 billion by Prime Minister Viktor Orban to help foster nationalistic conservatism. So if Tucker's speaking there, and that think tank was funded by Orban himself, that's literally Tucker taking money from this guy and then going on television to talk about how he's not really an authoritarian.
Not that Tucker needs to take money from a guy who bans gender studies and
wants to criminalize homosexuality.
Fresh in the news, interesting. In Orban's Hungary, spyware was used. This is the Pegasus spyware. In Orban's Hungary, spyware was used to monitor journalists and others who might challenge the government. The deployment of the Pegasus tool, confirmed with forensics, shows a willingness to use tactics previously deemed out of bounds. So, I guess like the Volk of Hungary came together and it's like, oh, we want to do a deal with the NSO group for that journalist monitoring software, and Orban's like, oh, I guess I have to follow the will of the people.
Oh, right. Which I seem to recall Tucker was so outraged that there was a FOIA request made, and that he said that he was being monitored by the government. One would think that an ideologically consistent Tucker Carlson might be a little bit interested in the facts that you just laid out there, Matt.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Guess
well,
not.
Hungary was obviously being transparent about it, being that we know about it now, right? Of course, right? Yeah. That's that trend, that classic Hungarian transparency that Tucker's talking about.
I just think it's unfair to judge Tucker Carlson for speaking at Swastikon. How in the world was he going to know that there's still going to be Nazis there? You know, that's just, you can't jump to conclusions.
And Orban has been a figure of fascination for the sort of intellectual dark web types. Yes. Jordan Peterson went over there a few years ago and was talking about how like Muslims aren't compatible with democracy and that sort of great stuff. And Eric Weinstein issued a few tweets where he's like, what? How could this happen? I didn't get the memo about we're meeting with this guy. And there's been absolutely zero follow-up about that. Absolutely nothing.
I mean, there was a lot of attraction among some members with Bolsonaro when he first took power, too. I remember that's why I got banned from commenting on Dave Rubin stuff, because he heard that Bolsonaro was banning woke stuff at universities and was like, well, that sounds like a good guy to me. I haven't looked too into him, but no, that sounds good to me. And like, if you believe these people are, again, kind of drawing that Bill Gates, hyper educated, hyper competent, then they're just like supporting Nazis. They're supporting like fascists, and that's the case. But I would be willing to believe, you know, that they are just a lot of uneducated about the ideology of fascism, the history of fascism, and they find themselves having these reactionary impulses that are incredibly fascistic and easily manipulated by actual real fascist leaders, and that's how they end up in bed with them. But they would never admit that because they would think they're hyper competent, and maybe some of them are just knowingly going along with this. But I think that we have just a large deficit of intellectual curiosity on the far right that masquerades as, ironically, intellectual curiosity, which just leads them to platform and also get involved with people who you should just really know better than be involved with.
And I think, Orban is specifically more of appealing figure to the intellectual dark web types because he's a bit more shrewd than, say, a Bolsonaro whose shit is getting vacuumed out through his nostrils. Bolsonaro is a bit more impulsive and nuts. Orban has been effectively executing this project for years now. And so I can't even imagine the meeting between these two minds. Think about Tucker Carlson and then just plaster him onto a leader. They're quite complementary, two peas in a pod.
And this expands too to J.D. Vance has touted a lot of pro-natalist policies that sound a lot like Orban in his speeches in Ohio. He's the country's run by childless leftist cat ladies and shit like that. And then also, of course, Steve King was a huge, proponent of Orban in the, when he was actually still in Congress. Right.
In terms of the national model for right-wing populism, in the vein of even what Bannon's project has been, in conjunction with what Tucker wants to do, Orban is probably, would you say that, Matt, their number one idol or vision of the Bannon Carlson type of leader? I can't think of anybody.
Well, I mean, a few decades ago, it would probably be Le Pen or something. But sort of those early '90s, late '80s, European integralist / proto-fascist groups that were springing up in the wake of the EU. But now, you said, now we have a few more actual examples of these leaders in place. They glom onto them because they're, I guess, speaking to that experiment being working in the sense that you can have this anti-left government that a lot of these people think that they want and have it be something other than a fascistic state.
Yeah, I think compared to Modi or Bolsonaro, Orban is just more European, so I think he's more useful, right? And also the anti-Muslim thing, I think, is a big, sort of underlying motive here.
Modi,
if it's not him, then it's Poland's government, Poland's prime minister. I mean, those two would seem to be who they look up to as terms of at least who's been successful in creating this sort of the sort of right-wing government they fantasize about.
Right. And then it also just comes up with him bumping against the European Union. They get to talk about the globalists. It's always, useful to their project.
Folks, there's more of what you've just saw where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you. Really, thank you.